following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
Welcome to Common Sense Living, the stepping stone to success. Common Sense Living, where common sense makes perfect sense. Think of Walt Disney. He didn't quit. That's common sense. Like Abraham Lincoln, turn your negatives into positives and your chaos into order. Patience, persistence, perspiration make an unbeatable combination for success. Welcome to Common Sense Living, where common sense makes perfect sense.
Welcome one more time to another edition of Common Sense Living. This is your host, Jose Luna, and with me, our co-host, Brian Yun. How's everything, Brian?
Everything's doing great today, Jose.
That's good. Well, the warm weather is coming, and the cold weather is fading away. So that's good. That's good news.
Season of change.
Seasons of change. And the spring is just about to kick in, and we are so happy to see the sun shining and, you know, the birds chirping and, you know, see the animals coming around. And that's great. It's a great sight. And hopefully we will have the summer here very soon as well. So, but today we have a special program, which is about one of the most controversial issues that has divided Christendom over the centuries. You know what it is? Well, we're gonna tell you just in 1 second, but let me tell you ahead of time a couple of facts about this particular issue. There's a library in Ireland. Is the largest library in the world that all the books are about this particular subject. It has over 15,000 volumes, and all the books are specialized in this particular library in Ireland, are specialized about this unique subject. You want to take a guess? The guess, go for it.
You know, I'm going to take a guess only because it's an educated guess.
Great.
It's about the Sabbath, Jose.
It's about the Sabbath.
What about the Sabbath?
The Sabbath. You see, the Sabbath is a major, or has been a major point of divide among people, believers, throughout centuries in all over the world, all over the world. And the issue has been about this anti-Semitic concept that many Christians have wanted to distinguish themselves from the Jewish people who are, by centuries, have kept the Sabbath holy. And therefore, the Christianity in general has embraced a different day of worship that is not the biblical day of worship. Yeah, and that's a problem.
Well, it is a problem. What a lot of people fail to realize is that the Sabbath itself was created for man. It wasn't created for Israel.
Right.
You know, that's where a lot of people go wrong. Looking back at the Bible, you know, on the seventh day, God rested. You know, that's where they get the word Sabbath from. In Hebrew, it's translated literally as rest.
Right. In fact, there are over 150 different languages that the name of the seventh day is specifically Shabbat, or Sabado, or Sabbaton, or Sabado. But all of them, in their original language, means Sabbath, rest. So here's the thing. How do we know that the Sabbath, seventh day, is the day of worship? Am I saved by worshiping on Saturday? Will I get lost if I don't worship on the day that God has called us to worship? Is my salvation at stake? Those are questions that we are going to explore in the second part of our talk. But in this first part, I want to address a little bit of the history about the Sabbath. The history about the Sabbath. Number one, Sabbath began at creation. As you pointed out right in your first statement, Sabbath was made for man. So let's begin there. Creation time. 6 days, everything was created. Man was created on the 6th day, and the Bible says that God completed everything he needed to create in 6 days. So technically, if you wish, the week should have ended on Friday.
The week should have ended on the 6th day. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Right? Because everything was created that needed to be created was created on the 6th day, finished on the 6th day. In fact, that's what the Bible says. In Genesis chapter 1, verses 29, actually 30, it says, also to every beast of the earth, to every bird of the air, and to everything that creeps on the earth in which there is life, I have given every green herb for food, and it was so. And verse 31 says, then God saw everything that he had made, and indeed it was very good. So the evening and the morning were the 6th day. So technically, Sabbath or the week should end on Friday.
But that's not how it is.
And that means on the 6th day, which is Friday, that means the first day is which one? Sunday.
Yeah.
So the 7th day must be then Sabbath. So why then did God decided to create another day when he had finished everything?
Well, there's a couple of reasons for it. One of those things, I mean, it's an interesting concept here. Now, God decided that he needed a rest. First of all, God doesn't need to rest.
The Bible says he doesn't get tired.
God doesn't get tired. He doesn't get tired, doesn't get old, he doesn't need to rest. But God declared the day for him, he rested on that day, but he rested so he could marvel at his creations.
Right. And not only that, on the previous day, he created Adam and Eve, right? And when he created Adam and Eve would not have a way to really connect with God alone on a one-on-one basis unless there was some time for it, because the commandment specifically says, thou shalt labor 6 days. So we are commanded to work 6 days and rest on the 7th day.
God recognized the need for people to have that day of rest.
You know, there have been in history attempts to create a 13 days week like Stalin, or 10 days week in France during the French Revolution. And when they tried to do these changes, not even the donkeys were able to keep up with it. The animals, the work animals like donkeys and horses, according to historians, they were not able to keep up with this long week, 10 days, 13 days, which means they had to go back to the concept of 7 days right after the French Revolution, 1798. For about 6 months, it was declared in all France that the week would have about 10 days.
Those French changing the world.
Oh yeah, of course. They are always, they are always the first in creating the major earthquakes, social earthquakes around the world. So they're very good at that. So, but the concept here is that the idea of resting 1 day a week is not only a social benefit, it is also a spiritual benefit, if you wish, and whatnot. But 6 things that I want to mention about the seventh day. I'm going to mention 7, but I'm going to say 6 of them right now. Number 1, the 7th day, it is intimately connected with creation. So in the commandment, the 10 Commandments or the 10 words in Exodus 20, God specifically says about the seventh day, the Sabbath. And he says specifically on verse 8, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, etc., etc., etc. And then it says, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. So it is intimately connected to creation. So to deny that is a problem. So the history of the Sabbath goes back to creation. Now, we talked about this before, and I just want to address this concept before I say the other 5 or the other 6 elements of Sabbath, is the weekly cycle. Does the weekly cycle obey to any astronomical event?
Well, the daily cycle, obviously, the Earth rotates around
Its own axis.
on its own axis. So there you have.
That's 24 hours. So you have 1 day.
So that's a day.
So you have the month.
The month, it's kind of
moon,
in accordance with the lunar cycles.
The lunar cycles translates around the Earth, right? And then the year.
The annual orbit around the sun.
The Earth around the sun. What does the week stand for? Nothing.
Well, the week stands for...
There's no astronomical event linked to the week.
Well,
the weekly cycle.
Well, there's a celestial event. That's
the only event is creation.
And that's how it was created. That's why it's like that.
So let's recap what we are saying. The week would have ended on Friday. The week would have had 6 days if God would have not created the seventh day. When God created the week, or created the seventh day and formed the week of 7 days, he didn't link it to any astronomical event on purpose. Because he's saying, I want you to spend this time with me. I want you to understand that this is not about anything that is being made. This is about you and me. That's basically the idea that God is sending to the people. Now, the second tenet about the Sabbath is that the seventh day is unchangeably a historical occurrence. So that means from the very beginning, from creation, the seventh day has never changed. That means the weekly cycle has always been the same. Can you tell us about 1592, what happened with the change of the Julian Gregorian calendar?
Well, what they did is they obviously, the period of time where you had people started to really study the celestial objects, and they realized that in a year's time that we actually traveled. It didn't take 365 days to travel the year, to travel around the sun. It took 365 and a quarter days. So they discovered that over time, they've actually lost time, is basically what they considered. They discovered that it does take a little bit longer than a total of 1 year to go around the sun. So over the period of time, they actually calculated that they've lost 11 days due to this celestial event. So they went in October. They went from October 4th, and they jumped it forward 11 days to October 15th. And the change actually happened on a Thursday to a Friday, where Thursday was October 4th. Friday, now they didn't change Thursday to Thursday. They changed Friday to October 15th. So there was no real...
What they changed was just the number.
They changed the number
but
of the
not
day.
the weekly cycle of the day, of the week.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right. So... And that's how they were able to keep up with with all the time that was lost with the different days.
And this was strictly so they could get an accurate account of what time it was in
Well, one of the rationales for that was that Easter was moving
Further and further
further
away
and
every
further
year.
away, so they needed to have some kind of set time limit or time frame for Easter, so they have to correct the calendar, and that's exactly what happened. Now the point is, the weekly cycle has always been the same. So we know from anthropology and from history that the seventh-day cycle has always been the same. Saturday is always the seventh day. Has always been, and it has never changed. Doesn't matter where you go, has always been the same. Now, number three, tenet number three, the meaning of the 7-day Shabbat, Sabbath, Sabbaton, Sabbados, Samedi, the meaning of the seventh day transcends Hebrew history. Why?
Well, I mean, a lot of people consider, you look at it like this, it was created at creation. So, you know, Hebrew history, it really doesn't begin from what we know of, you know, until it actually becomes, you know, Exodus in the Bible. During the period of time where Moses takes the people out of Egypt.
Right.
And then, you know, and it's interesting because now they travel through the wilderness of sin, and they come across, and God's giving them food to eat. You know, one of the things that they did, that God provided, the manna came down, and they would go out every day and they collect, each according to their own needs. You know, basically one person would go collect as much as they wanted to collect. And then they found that after everybody collected it, you know, those who collected a lot had just enough, and those who didn't collect a lot didn't lack anything. Well, the funny thing is now, this period of time comes on the 6th day.
On Friday.
Moses told the others, he
collect
said,
double.
Go collect double. Collect some for today and tomorrow. And this is what we can't, because every time we tried to collect more or save some, it would get rotten and worms are growing it. And he says, no, this is the 6th day. Go collect double, because tomorrow is the Sabbath. You're not going to go out to go collect it. So this is before the time when Moses received the 10 Commandments from God. This was before that time. So the simple fact that they already were in observance of the Sabbath shows. And one of the things also, prior, you know, one of the people, when they would go out, God commanded them, they would go out, and some of the people would actually go try to collect on Saturday the manna that was out there, and they found none.
They found nothing.
And God had actually specifically said to Moses, why do you break my laws and my commandments? Why do you continue to do so? So this alone implies that they had knowledge of the Sabbath. And keep in mind, Genesis was written, you know, 2,500 years. It was an account of Moses 2,500 years after creation. So it was really a historical account of what happened. And until actually God gave them the 10 Commandments, there was not really any necessity for them to record the laws, because they already knew the laws. They followed them.
Absolutely. And in fact, the concept of the law, if you go to Genesis chapter 26, verse 5, where Abraham is called the Hebrew for the first time in the Bible. And the term the Hebrew, or Hebrew, means the one who crosses the river. So he had already crossed the river. And specifically about Abraham, the Hebrew, who he was originally from what today is called Iraq, okay? But he crossed the river, so he's somewhere around Canaan. He walked all that way, you know, he left his land as God told him to leave his land and his people. So he goes to and cross the river. The Bible specifically says in Genesis 26, verse 5, it specifically says that Abraham the Hebrew, he kept God's commandments, God's ordinances, God's statutes, and God's laws. 4 different categories.
So this goes to tell us that prior to the 10 Commandments actually being recorded,
or written on
written, and again recorded.
Right.
They already knew what God's commandments were.
Absolutely.
They already knew what God's laws were, because that was directly, it was handed down from the patriarchs. You know, you're talking about Adam.
right.
Okay, these laws and commandments were handed down to Adam, down to his son. You know,
Verbally.
verbally.
Now, and that's why we find Joseph, he's at Potiphar's house, and Potiphar's wife tries to entice him to sleep with him or with her. And he said, how can I do this great sin and commit this heinous crime and sin against God? So he himself is acknowledging that it's a sin to do that. There was no law written. There was no law written. So, but he knew it was a sin. How? Because the law was transmitted verbally through his father, the patriarch Jacob, who was also one of the patriarchs. So, but you know, another tenet about the Bible is that the seventh day comes before the giving of all law, which is what we are talking about. You know, it comes before any giving of any other law. In fact, you know, it is the first institution that God created on earth was marriage. And once he blessed them and married them, the second was to keep the Sabbath holy. So there are no other big institutions on the earth that more important, right from creation, were set up right up there on Friday and Saturday.
Right, and that's
marriage and Sabbath
right,
keeping.
and that's what you're applying. You know, when God created Adam and Eve, and then the two became one.
Right.
You know.
So the implication of this is that by virtue of us keeping the seventh day holy, we also may become one with God. That's the implication of that event put together one after the other. You see, God didn't give the Sabbath only to Adam. He gave it to both of them after they both became one. And the commandment specifically says, you know, so that we remember that God created everything, so that we become one with God in his creation, reminding ourselves what God has done and does for us on a single daily basis. It's a very interesting concept. Another tenet is that the seventh day is blessed and made holy by God. So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy. What do you think about that? Because some people think that the Ten Commandments are, a multiple choice? Something like that, right? Well, like they can pick and choose?
It's humorous. I can't say that it's funny. It's humorous because I have to get a chuckle at it. Because a lot of people do. They want to pick one of them. They want to stand by it vehemently because they believe in it. But yeah, they don't want to turn around and obey another. You know, for example, you know, marriage itself. You know, marriage is supposed to be holy. Covetousness.
Right.
You know,
right.
People think that, you know, it's okay to think about and covet another person or another person's wife, or, you know, just to covet what another person has. You know, they want to have a nicer RV, they want to have a bigger house, they got to build a bigger addition that's way more than what they need. Or, I mean, there's some room for excess. I mean, God provided for you and made people, you know, have some excess. There is some room for a little bit of excess, but, you know, to go overboard and to be overly extravagant, you know. But again,
I know.
there's people that they'll pick and choose certain things, you know, but yet they'll stand by. It's okay. It's okay to murder, per se. You know,
Right.
Abortion runs rampant in this country.
Right.
It's okay to do that. And on the flip side of it, the death penalty is okay. It's okay to murder somebody after they committed a crime. You know, here's somebody. It's wrong to murder somebody, but to kill somebody after they committed a crime because we have the death penalty, that's okay. And again, I mean, this is all, it's somebody that firmly believes in something, they contradict themselves, and it's rampant.
Right.
You know,
right.
the fundamental basis of the Bible is lost.
I know. So that's very, very good point. Very well taken. And another tenet is that the seventh day was made holy before the arrival of sin. But let me just take one moment to talk about the concept of holiness. Because sometimes in our Western mentality, we don't understand what that means. What is holy in our Western mentality? You tell me. Do you know anything that's holy?
Well, I've got this pair of jeans that I've been wearing a long time, and that rubs
they
out
holy?
a little bit. They rubs out a little bit at the knees, and it gets holy.
No.
What's holy? I mean, I look back when I think about what's going to be holy. I look back, and again, I kind of look at the Bible for what it is. Prior to Moses receiving the Ten Commandments, Moses has gone up on the mountain. He actually came down from the mountain, and he had told the people to step away from the mountain, step away from the base of the mountain, not to touch even the base surrounding the mountain, because that's where God was going to set foot, and this was going to be, it was essentially going to be holy ground.
Right.
And it was going to be a sacrament. This whole ground is going to be, this is where God's presence is going to be.
Yes.
And it's going to be holy. So I kind of think back, you know, what's holy? What's holy is what has to do with God, and where everything that he touches really is holy.
It becomes holy. So let me give an example of what perhaps holiness means in biblical terms. This cup right here, right? Teacup. What is that made for? What was this cup made for?
It's merely a vessel to hold a hot liquid, and you could sip on it.
Utilize it, sip on it, whatever you put in it, right? So if I take this teacup and smash somebody on the face with it, according to the Bible, I am defiling the teacup plus the person I smashed the teacup on it. Why? Because I used it for another purpose that this teacup was not made for.
Yeah, it was intended for a different purpose.
So I'm making this teacup unholy. Does it make sense what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So at the very moment we use something that for a different purpose of what it was intended for, we are defiling that element. So when the Sabbath, the seventh day, that was intended for us to spend it with God, for us to spend it with one another in fellowship of the believers, and, you know, in helping out people, and being in connection specifically with God, and we use it for something else, we are defiling what God made holy. We are indeed defiling what God made holy, which means he set it aside for a specific purpose. And that means I don't want to do that. Because when God calls something holy, he's holy.
He's the authority.
He's the authority. I don't want to go against that. So anyway, time is over. We have to wrap this up. But we want you to think about what we said here today. And we want to invite you to consider the idea of keeping the seventh day Sabbath holy. Do you have to belong to a denomination to do that? No. In fact, I have a lot of friends that don't belong to any denomination and keep the Sabbath holy. And I know of a lot of friends or acquaintances. I have some acquaintances and I have a couple of friends who their church keep the first day of the week as their day of worship, but they also keep the seventh day holy. So, because that's what the commandments calls for. That's what God is asking us to do. And if God is asking me to do something, I want to do it to the best of my ability. Are we going to make mistakes? Absolutely. But let's try to please God in everything we can. God bless you. See you next time in our next edition of Common Sense Living, where common sense makes perfect sense.
Welcome to Common Sense Living, the stepping stone to success. Common Sense Living, where common sense makes perfect sense. Think of Walt Disney. He didn't quit. That's common sense. Like Abraham Lincoln, turn your negatives into positives and your chaos into order. Patience, persistence, perspiration make an unbeatable combination for success. Welcome to Common Sense Living, where common sense makes perfect sense.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.